we'll see if we have any questions or anything. And I will be recording this. So after the meeting is over, I think Beth or Jenna will send you out a link to the recording. And if you want a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, you can also send Beth or Jenna an email and they will get you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Dave Barker. If you need to get a hold of me specifically, dave.barker@trainingconcepts.com. That is our URL for our website, and the phone number if you decide you need to call our office. So these are the topics that I wanted to talk about today. Trends in business intelligence a little bit. So just talk about what business intelligence is and why it's important, talking about it. Then I'm going to do some demos using Power BI Desktop. I expect to spend the majority of the time doing that. And if I have time at the end, if not, no big deal. We'll go over the other Microsoft products that relate to business intelligence. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about some of the courses that we offer to learn some of this stuff. So business intelligence always kind of seems like an oxymoron, right? So can we really have business intelligence? But the key with business intelligence is that in business today, we have a lot of data, and the data is spread out all over the place. It might be in different databases. They might not even all be Microsoft SQL Server. Maybe we get some Oracle databases, some Access databases, MySQL. We might even have data that's not necessarily stored in relational databases. The data might be stored in, for example, Excel spreadsheets, or it might be stored in CSV files or XML files. We could have data that is used in our corporation that is available via internet services or web pages. All of these different places that the data is stored can make it difficult to access the data and make timely business decisions based on the data. Plus, by having this data all in these different locations, it makes it difficult to maintain kind of the integrity of the data, make sure that we have what we call single point of truth. And then terminology-wise, making sure that terminology in all the different data sources is what our business analyst would expect to have for terminology. All of those things are part of business intelligence. So our goal with the overall, quote, business intelligence is to make sure that all of the data from all of the sources is available, that it is available in a timely fashion and easy to access. And easy to access in today's world has brought along a whole lot of different meetings, but really business analysts want to be able to access the data from any location using any device at any time. And then obviously making sure that the data is accurate is a big part of it as well. So some trends are that we want to try to make this data available as close to real time as we can for making business decisions. So in the past, when a business analyst type of role in the company needed to look at the data, there would be a process involved of the business analyst requesting the data from somebody in the IT department or the development department. And there would be some back and forth while the business analyst explained what it is that they were looking for. And then, of course, the The IT person would have to find time to gather that information from the sources and get it presented in a way that the business analyst could use. Typically, that used to be like an Excel spreadsheet of some sort. And then the business analyst could get the data. And of course, once they got the data, then there would be some more back and forth, because very rarely did you ever get the data exactly the way they wanted with all the pieces they needed the first time. And you'd be back and forth trying to get this all done. And it would take a while to get the information that the person was looking for so that they could then analyze it using all of their wonderful Excel spreadsheet skills to make sure that they were making intelligent business decisions. Even worse would be that after we gathered all the data and put it in this spreadsheet, it was common for that spreadsheet then to get emailed around, where now we've got multiple copies of the spreadsheet and people looking at different copies of it to make business decisions. And one person may get an old copy and not realize it. Maybe one person got the spreadsheet and looked at a formula and realized that the formula was wrong. They corrected the formula, but now some people have a copy that has the incorrect formula. So they're looking at different numbers, all kinds of reasons why that process was not ideal in the business decision-making space. We also have to combine data from multiple data sources, maybe inside and outside our company or from inside our company. And we didn't really have a way to get the ability to access and analyze the data without involving somebody in information technology department. So the concept of self-service for reporting and analysis didn't really exist. And of course, the ability to access all this information from mobile devices, so tablets and phones even, has become very, very prevalent. And then business intelligence used to be something that was really only talked about in very large organizations. But because all of the tools have become so easy to use for the most part and readily available and cost effective, we have seen much smaller organizations, small businesses, medium-sized businesses really start looking at trying to take advantage of all the data they have. So Microsoft has a tool, Power BI Desktop. That's an application. It's an application. It's free. Power BI Desktop does not cost anything. It combines all of the Excel power tools, Power Pivot, Power Query, and all those things into a standalone application. Now, once you've created a, quote, Power BI report using the Power BI Desktop application, you have the ability to publish that Power BI report to the Power BI service. That does require you to have a license for the Power BI service, which if your company is using Microsoft 365 or Office 365 licenses, you may already have. But if you have that license, you can publish the reports that you've created using Power BI Desktop to the Power BI service portal, which of course then integrates in most of the other Microsoft 365 services like SharePoint and Teams, to make that information easily accessible for all the users of your cloud services. But even without Power BI Service Web Portal, which again wouldn't be free, that would require licenses, you can download and install the Power BI Desktop and do most of what I'm going to demonstrate coming up here in a minute for free. What you would be generating would be a PBIX file, very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. It would be a Power BI report file. You can also publish those Power BI reports to SQL Server Reporting Services, that's SSRS, 2016 or later. Now, you do have to have the appropriate license to be able to install a Power BI server on-prem. So Again, that would not be free. You would have a license that would allow you to install the Power BI server on-premise add-on to SQL Server reporting services, but then you could publish these reports on-prem instead of to the cloud. And of course, there is a course that we offer. It's at the bottom of this slide. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's for analyzing data with Power BI, and would teach you how to use Power BI Desktop. So I'm not going to wait till the end to do the demos here. I'm going to go ahead and do these now, so I make sure I have time to finish some demos. And then after I finish the demos, if I have time, I'll go through some other stuff. All right, so I'm going to try to create a couple basic reports here using Power BI. Now, before I get started creating the reports, I've got an on-prem SQL Server with a couple databases, the AdventureWorks Data Warehouse in particular I'm going to use. I also have a AdventureWorks LT database, which is the smaller AdventureWorks sample database. And that database is actually hosted in Azure SQL Server. So that would be platform as a service SQL Server. So if I look in here, in Azure, I have a SQL server called TCSQL, and it's got a database on it. And it's just the Azure AdventureWorks database. So I have a connection to that database, and this is just using SQL Server Management Studio. So using SQL Server Management Studio for this database, I've got a query where I can run this query and I can get results back. These results are coming from this database in Azure, which is in the cloud. And of course, and then these results right here, those are actually coming from my on-prem SQL Server for the AdventureWorks database. That's some results that came directly from the AdventureWorks database. Okay. And this database it's called the AdventureWorks DW for Data Warehouse. So it's designed as a database, as a data warehouse database. And in data warehouse terminology, we refer to fact tables and dimension tables. A fact table has, amazingly enough, facts that describe things. So like I'll be using in my demo this fact internet sales table. It's got the numbers, the quantities, the prices, the discounts. These are all numbers. So you can see there's a bunch of foreign key relationships in here. So this fact table is described by these dimension tables. So there's a dimension customer table, and the dimension customer table would have all the information about a customer, and so on. So I'm going to be using this table in my this database in my first demo, and it's an on-premise database. So this database is physically stored on a SQL server that is in the environment that I'm in. It is not in the cloud. Okay, so when we start learning about Power BI Desktop, it's just an application. You go download it. So I downloaded this yesterday and installed it on this machine. You can go to the web and download this, no requirement for any purchase or anything, and install it. And when you do, then you'll be able to launch up Power BI Desktop. Now, of course, the Power BI Desktop application is going to want to try to get you to sign in. So if you're not signed in, it's going to pop up several messages saying sign in or create an account, but none of that's required. The only time having an account is required is if you want to publish the data to the Power BI service. So you can safely ignore all the messages about signing in and creating an account and all those things if you don't want to do it. Now, if your company has Azure AD and you have an Azure Active Directory work or school account, and your company has licenses for Power BI, you can sign in and you can publish these things to your dashboard. Now, publishing them to not a dashboard, your workspace. When you're publishing to a workspace, you have your own personal workspace, and then you have
They have the same information.
Kevin, did you have a question? Or are you just coming in and, okay. So you have your own workspace. You can publish reports to your own workspace with the Power BI free license. So if your company has an Azure Active Directory tenant and you have a work or school account that you are allowed to log in as, you can create and publish these reports, but they would only be available to you. You can't share them with anyone else. In order to be able to share the reports with other people that you have published to the Power BI service, you have to have a Power BI Pro license. So in a typical organization that's using Power BI, you may have a few users, people that would normally have been in the quote report writer kind of role or business analyst kind of role, that would have Power BI Pro licenses where they can create the reports and publish them for other people to use. But everybody else in the organization just has a Power BI free license so that they can view the reports that are published to the service. And then, of course, they have the ability to create their own reports. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and begin this process. I am logged into my tenant, so I can publish a report and show you what it looks like, but that's not required. So when we first start learning about Power BI Desktop, we have 3 stages to this process. One is get the data. You can't do anything until you have some data. The second stage, once we get the data, is to transform the data, create a model of the data. We're going to model the data, and then once we've modeled it, we're going to actually visualize it and create the report. So I'm going to start by getting some data. Okay, so we can get data from any source that is supported by Power BI Desktop. And as you can see, this is a long list of sources for the data. There's very rarely a time where you can't find that you can at least get access to the data in some way. And I'm going to demonstrate a few of these over the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to start here with a SQL Server database. This is an on-prem SQL Server database. Okay, and I am going to connect to my on-prem SQL Server. Spelling counts there. So I'm connecting to that AdventureWorks DW database. Now, here for data connectivity, of course, in this real short webinar, I don't have time to go over the great detail of this, but the choice here is, are we going to import the data into the PBIX file, or are we just going to query it every time we run the report? Now, one thing that's important to understand is in order to do a direct query, wherever people are running the report from has to have access to the data source. So if you plan on publishing this report to the cloud, to the Power BI service, the database needs to be accessible to the service. Okay? We can do that using what's called the Power BI Gateway, but in this particular case, I don't have the Power BI Gateway set up to give access to this server from the internet, so I can't do a direct query for this one, so I'm going to have to choose import. When I choose import, I could choose to put in a SQL statement here, which I will do, I think, here in a little bit if I don't run out of time. But in this case, I'm not going to go to advanced. I'm just going to say import and click next. It's going to log me in and connect me to that database. And I can see all of the tables and views and functions that are available in that database. So these are the same things that I see here when I look at this database right here. All right, so I'm going to pick the fact internet sales table. It gives me a sample of the data. so I can make sure I got what I'm looking for. And then I have this really nice feature right here where I can say select related tables. What it's going to do is it's going to look at the SQL Server database and look at the foreign primary key relationships in the database. Based on those foreign primary key relationships, you'll see a bunch more check marks show up in here. So according to the fact internet sales table, the fact internet sales reason, the sales territory, the promotion, the product, the dim date, and dim customer tables and dim currency are all related to the fact internet sales table in some way. Over here in the lower right, I have load or transform data. If I choose load, it's just going to load the data as is, and it's not going to open up the Power Query editor where I can transform or model the data. If I want to transform it right now, I can click on transform data. If I choose load and I want to transform it later, that's no big deal. I can do that. I can do it now or I can do it later. In this case, I'm going to say transform data now. So that is going to open up the Power Query editor. Now, if you've ever used Power Query in Excel, this should look fairly familiar. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. So I see all my tables that I selected. So this was the one I actually selected, and then these were all selected because they were related. When I click on a particular table, I see all the columns and all the data. Over here, we have what's called the applied steps in the query settings. If I were to go to source and click on the little gear icon, it shows me where my server and database was. If I had a query, that would be in here as well. If I go to navigation and click on the little there, it'll show me which tables were selected. I could go in and modify it or select different tables. Okay, the next thing I can do here, and this is called transforming or modeling the data. I can go in and change the data a little bit if I want. So for example, there's a couple columns in here that I don't really want. I'm going to get rid of a couple of these columns. Ugh. So I don't really care about this carrier tracking number or this customer PO number. So I'm going to click on carrier tracking and I'm going to hold down the control key and click on customer PO number. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to say remove columns. So over here in the applied steps now, it's got a step called remove columns. If I were to click on this little X, those two columns will just come back. I actually do want them gone, so I'm going to do remove columns and remove those two columns from the model. And I'm going to remove a few more columns. This time we're going to go to dim customer, and I'm going to remove some columns that I don't really care about in here. I'm going to remove the title. I'm going to remove the name style column. I don't really want that in my model. I'm going to get rid of the suffix column. I'm going to get rid of those three. So that added a remove column here. You could right click on this and rename this step to make it a little bit more descriptive. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. For the marital status column, I'm going to show another feature of modeling the data. We're going to replace the values. So in here, I'm going to say I want to find the letter M, replace it with married. And I'm going to repeat that process, replace values, S with single. We'll do the same thing over here. We're going to replace these values. We'll replace M with male. F with female. Okay, so each of these is a step. Again, I could go through and right click and edit each one of these to give them a slightly more descriptive name. But notice as I click on each one, it shows me what would change if I were to remove it. You see what's happening over here as I click on each one? It's like I'm replaying those applied steps. Okay, and you can actually change the order of these steps as long as the order is not dependent on a step before or after it. So I could right click on this step and say move up, because the renaming of the M and the F are not dependent on each other. Actually, those are dependent on each other because of the fact that I did a replace on the M. Watch what happens here. So now when I go this one, it's replacing the M with the male again, so it's messing it up the female. But I should be able to right click on and move down, and now that order doesn't matter again. Okay, so those are the basic changes I wanted to make to this. Let's see, is there anything else I could make? I don't really need to do this, but right here in the middle name, you see a bunch of null values. I could go in here and say replace values, null, and get rid of all the null values from the middle name. Okay, so at this point, I have a choice of closing and apply, applying or close. Really, it's just dependent on, am I done or not? Is there anything else I want to change? If I'm completely done, I'm going to click close and apply. That's going to close my Power Query editor. It's actually reaching out to that database now and gathering all of these rows of data. And because I did import, this data is literally being imported into the Power BI report, meaning I could actually run this report with no connectivity to the SQL server and have it work. Now, of course, the data eventually would become stale, but it would still, the report would still work, connectivity to the actual server. All right, so now I've got my report view, my data view, and then my relationship model view. So I can see all the relationships between the different tables. I can see the individual tables and look at the data. And then, of course, the report view where we'll do the visualization. Okay, so we're going to change a couple more things here. So over here on my fact internet sales, I'm going to give myself a little bit more by clicking on this little chevron to minimize the filters. And I'm going to make my fields list a little bit bigger. So on the fact internet sales, these are all of my fields that are part of the fact internet sales table. And you see all these ones that have the little sum symbol in front of them. That's because it has made an intelligent decision about what it should do with this value in a report. The default summarization for the discount amount would be sum. Same for extended amount and so on. There might be one of these. So for example, this is a key value right here. For the key value, it defaults to being a count as a summarization. But for example, if I wanted this discount to not be a sum, I could change the default summarization to be average, min, max, whatever I wanted it to be. I want to go to the sales amount. Okay, and where the format says currency, if it said general, I would change it to currency, and then I'm going to click on this little down arrow here and choose that I want to do English United States for my currency format. Okay, and we're going to do one other thing here. We're going to go up to dim customer. Right now, the dim customer has a first name and a last name. We want to be able to refer to the customer using their full name. So I'm going to right click on dim customer and create a new column. Okay. A column the difference between a column and measure is very subtle. A measure is doing some type of calculation, but the process is pretty much the same. So I've created a new column. That opened up my DAX formula bar, data analysis expression language. So in the column name, I'm going to type full name. That's going to be the name of my column. So right here where it says the word column, it's going to actually change to full name here in a second. And then I have some IntelliSense. So if I just start typing DIM, I can see that I have a list of DIM customer. All right. If I hit tab, it'll complete it over, and then I can hit the square bracket. And if I keep typing, I'm looking for the first name. I hit tab to finish it because I don't like typing the whole thing. I'm going to use the ampersand symbol, which in DAX, which is the language that's being used here, that's DAX. The ampersand symbol is the, I want to concatenate these strings together symbol. And then I'm going to use a double quote with a space and a double quote, which is just going to add a space between the first and last name. Another ampersand symbol. I'll start typing DIM, last name, and then hit enter. So I'm going to end up with a new column over here called full name, and that full name column is just going to combine the first name with a space and the last name. So I added a new column that wasn't part of the data stores, which we would typically generically call a calculated column. All right, so now we're ready to actually visualize this data a little bit. Okay, so question? Someone?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got some questions in the chat, Dave.
Oh, well, I can't do that. And so
Daniel was just asking if the currencies and other attributes were expandable, if you needed to add more currencies, etc., for the demo you just did.
Well, this information is coming directly from a SQL Server database. So if I wanted to, I could do what I just did to create a new column based on a calculation of the data that was here. But if I wanted to add new currencies, I would go back here where the data came from in the data warehouse and do that.
Okay.
And I can't do the demo and monitor the chat. So if you have a question that can't wait until the end, go ahead and just interrupt me.
Sounds good.
I mean, we've only got, I think, 8 attendees, so feel free. Speak up and ask a question. All right, so I made a couple modifications. Now we're going to create a visualization for this data. We're going to go down to DIM customer, and we're going to choose gender. And marital status. All right, and then we are going to go back up to fact internet sales and select sales amount. All right, and then let's see, we want to do stacked column chart. That looks good. So we have our sales amount, female, male, married, single. For our visualization, of course, these are the different visualizations. If I didn't like that one, I could change it to a different one of these charts, and you can actually add custom ones into this list. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting on this. So I'm clicking on the Format tab in the Visualization section, as opposed to the Fields tab. I'm going to go to Title. We're going to change the title here a little bit. Sales by gender and need a little bit more room here. Marital status. I'm going to center it. So watch up here. This is the title that we're talking about. I'm going to center it, make it a little bit bigger. Of course, I could change the font and the color and all kinds of other stuff as well. On that visualization. Of course, there's tons and tons of other things that we could do. But let's do a different visualization now. We're going to take the order quantity from the fact internet sales. I'm going to drag it over here and put it on a blank surface of the report area as opposed to up in the existing visualization. That's going to create me a new visualization based on the order quantity. All right, and we are going to put in the axis what do we want to do? We want to do dim product color. So now based on the color, we have the order quantity. And we're going to change that to a donut chart look. So it shows the percentages of each one. Actually, I think I want to take this. I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to take this, make it a little bit smaller first. Move it up here. My least favorite part of doing this, making everything look pretty. And then the title. Looks good. Think that'll be all right. All right, we're going to do one more. Take the sales amount, drop it over here. And we're going to do dim date, English month name. I'm going to spread that out all the way this way so we can see the names of the months. And change our title a little bit here. Okay, well, looks all right. All right, so now I've got a visualization for my report. Nothing too fancy. For the date, I don't have a hierarchy in here to use. We could go create a hierarchy, which I'll look at doing a little bit later, and then we could drill down in on the years, months, and days. We could filter this by married or single and or gender to change the way that looks. We could filter these by the color if we wanted to see it. But this is a pretty basic report. I'm going to save that. So now I wanted to point out, because I did an import of the data, You see how big that file is. It's 15 meg, because the actual data, the actual values for all of these records are actually in that file, which means that this file, just like an Excel spreadsheet or anything else, could be attached to an email and emailed to somebody, placed in a shared folder on a server where people can access it. It's very, very similar at this point to just like an Excel spreadsheet, only it's a little bit easier to do the visualizations and modeling. But you could accomplish what I just did. You could accomplish nearly all of that in Excel using Power Pivot and Power Query with the charts and stuff that were in Excel. At this point, it's not a whole lot different. Where it becomes quite a bit different, though, is now that I've created this, I have the ability to publish it. Of course, this is where I have to have a Power BI service. So I'm going to publish this to my workspace. And I don't currently have anything in my workspace. So I'm going to publish this to my workspace. So now that I've published that to my workspace, I should have a report in here. So there's that report. And I can see that report. I can change my view and width and so on. And back on my actual report, I could change to the mobile layout and create a mobile layout for this report as well. So that if somebody were to view this report on a mobile device, this is the way it would look. So they would be able to connect with the Power BI service on a mobile device, and the report would look like that. So you can create your page view and your mobile view. Of course, I'd have to save that and republish it, which I'm not going to do right this second. But this report now is stored in the Power BI service. What's important about this is that because I imported the data into the PBIX, I published it to the Power BI service. The data in the Power BI service would not have the ability to be updated because there's no way for the Power BI service to get back to the AdventureWorks data warehouse that is in my on-prem SQL server currently. Now, it is possible to make that happen. I would just have to set up what's called the Power BI gateway to allow the Power BI service to get back to this server, but I don't have that set up for this particular database right now. So I'm kind of stuck with this data being static in here. If I wanted this data to get updated with new refreshed data, currently without the Power BI gateway, the only way I would have to do it is to go back to my report, refresh my data,